evening, everyone. Welcome to the Barron Art Center. My name is Antonia. I'm the chair of the Education Committee, and along with our commission here, we enjoy bringing these type of programs. Tonight we have Marianne Zalata. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Art History from Drew University and her Master's in Art History at Rutgers, where she also received a Master's of Library Science degree. She has lectured extensively on cruise ships and has taught art courses at Ollie Road since 2009, something that maybe some of you are familiar with. Her area of interest is 17th through 19th century art with a specialty in Italian Baroque art and architecture. And just so everyone knows, this is part of a three-part series, and tonight we're discussing the Louvre in Paris, the museum, but we're also going to have on May 25th the Hermitage at St. Petersburg in Russia. On June 22nd we have the National Gallery in London, and we also have in April a special presentation on Vigée Lebrun, and I believe that it's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art as well, if you'd like to go there and coincide with the lecture. Before we start, I ask that everyone turn off their cell phones to avoid any interruptions. And if you have any questions at the end, I'm sure that Marianne will be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So without further ado, I welcome you to the Louvre. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the committee and also the Barron Art Center for having me here this evening. And it's really a great pleasure to be here indeed. Well, we're going to be talking this evening about the Louvre Museum. The Louvre has in its collection more than 3,000 paintings, not to mention thousands of drawings and pieces of sculpture as well. Now, of course, I can't show you 3,000 paintings, but what we're going to do, we're going to look at a representative selection. And let's think of it as if we were in Paris at a very fine restaurant, having a tasting menu, and that's what I'm going to offer you tonight, a tasting menu. So first of all, we're going to start discussing, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background as to the history of the Louvre, and I'm going to try to weave some of that history into my lecture as well. Here is a picture of the Louvre, the main central area, with Mario Pei's glass pyramid that was added in 1989. That was placed there primarily because the crowds of the Louvre were of such a nature that they needed some kind of crowd control, shall we say. And you enter the pyramid and you go down an escalator where you pay your fee, and then you go up the escalator into the main museum. Of course, it's a great thing to have, especially in the rain, because the crowds were getting just so tremendous and everybody was getting wet or getting very cold, and this is a way to immediately get people into the museum. Now, the Louvre is built on a site of an old fortress that was used to protect the city from the Vikings, because the Vikings came up on their longboats into the Seine River up to Paris, and there was a number of attacks that were made. And this was actually an old fortress. Now, the Louvre today is the most visited museum in the world. They have something like 10 million visitors every year, and when I was there in September, I'm sure there were at least 50,000 that one day. It's just absolutely enormous, okay? Now, the glass pyramid does not detract from the building itself. It actually is very light and airy. It's not bulky. And of course, you can see the main facade, the facade of the main part of the building through the pyramid. So it doesn't look bulky and it doesn't look out of place either. Now, and the view of the pyramid itself allows you to take in the entire courtyard. Now, my next slide shows you the actual a map of the actual Louvre itself, and you can see that it is quite a very large building. It's built in with three wings, and the central court, of course, is called the Cour Napoleon, and it also has the pyramid, Mario Pei's pyramid there. Now here is a picture of the Louvre at night, and you can see how marvelous it looks in the evening. Now, the French kings continued to add to the Louvre throughout its history. The main part of the building was begun under the reign of Francis I in 1525. The wing that you see on your right-hand side is the one that faces the Seine River, and that was added in the 19th century. The wing on the left-hand side, called the Richelieu wing, was added under a Baron Haussmann when he renovated Paris from 1853 until the 1870s. It was a renovation that took 20 years, and that building was added so that we have the full Louvre was built by the 1870s. Now, I'm going to show you Francis I. This is the king who began the construction of the Louvre. This painting is done by Jean Clouet, and we can see the king here. It's a very large painting, and it was, again, the Louvre was the official residence of the kings of France, and until it became a museum. Now, you can see here Francis I occupies the full space of the painting. Look at that wonderful costume he has on. And Clouet paints him as a king. And he's not wearing a crown, but you know that he's a very important person indeed. Now, here is another man who was instrumental in the development of the Louvre Museum. His name was Cardinal Richelieu. He was the chief minister of King Louis XIII. He was an art connoisseur and collected works by Leonardo and Veronese, which were to become part of the Louvre collection of Italian art, which is what I'm going to be showing you in a few minutes. So in other words, these people were very important and very instrumental in the creation of the collection of the Louvre. Here are two other people. There's Louis XIV in all his glory. A painting done by Hyacinthe Rigaud, who was a very famous portraitist at the time. And Louis stands there with his red high heels. The reason for the red heels is because only aristocrats could wear red-heeled shoes. And Louis was always very proud of his legs. And whenever there was a ballet in Versailles, Louis would always take part in the ballet. He loved the ballet, and he would come and dance in the ballet. Now, this painting was to have been sent to the King of Spain. But after it was executed, done by Hyacinthe Rigaud, everyone in the court and Louis himself loved the painting, so it was not sent off to Spain. Notice that Louis is not wearing a crown. Well, he doesn't have to wear the crown. After all, he was the one who said, "The state, it is I. I am the state here in France." And of course, he's wearing the trappings of a king, the ermine robe, all embroidered with fleur-de-lis, which of course was a symbol of France. And he looks quite glorious, I think. Next to him is Cardinal Mazarin. Now, Mazarin came from Italy. He was an Italian cardinal of the church. And he came to France as a representative of the papacy, but he stayed in France for the rest of his life. Obviously, he was having a very good time in France. Indeed, he was, because he, first of all, Louis XIV became king at the age of 5 years old. Now, a 5-year-old can't really rule a nation, so Cardinal Mazarin and Louis's mother, Anne of Austria, were the regents at the time. And Louis was trained in kingship by none other than Cardinal Mazarin. Mazarin also was his godfather, so there was a very close relationship with them throughout Louis's life. Now, Cardinal Mazarin he trained Louis in kingship, but he was also the one that developed Louis's taste in art, and he himself was a collector of paintings. Louis inherited 200 paintings, and by the time of his death, that is to say Louis's death, there were 2,000 paintings in the royal collection. Now, let's start looking at the collection. And who was the most famous resident of the Louvre? Well, none other than, of course, Mona Lisa. Now, most people, when they first see this painting, their first reaction is, "My God, it's a small painting." And indeed, it is small. It's approximately 30 inches high by 20 inches wide. And it would be very easy to simply tuck under your arm, which one day in 1911 someone did. An Italian workman took the painting off the wall, tucked it under his arm, and walked away with it. The painting was not found for 2 more years. But meanwhile, the picture of the painting was plastered on all the newspapers, so that she became, if she was not already famous, she became instantly famous at that time. Now, how did this painting get to France? Well, Clouet, that is to say, Francis I, had a beautiful chateau in Fontainebleau. It was a hunting chateau, but he decided that he was going to redecorate it, and he was going to get all the best artists from Italy to come and help in the redecoration. But meanwhile, he also asked Leonardo if Leonardo would like to come and be his court painter. So Leonardo came, bringing this painting with him. The painting itself is of a young lady, Lisa Marie Ghirardini, and it was commissioned by her husband. Poor Mr. Ghirardini never got the painting because Leonardo kept it with him all his life. He never felt that it was quite finished. He had it on an easel, and every once in a while he would go and put few little dabs of paint on it and then leave it alone. Now, when he died, the painting was taken back to Italy by Leonardo's heir. And it is believed that it was brought back by none other than Napoleon. When he invaded Italy, he and his armies brought back 5,000 paintings from Italy. And this was one of them. So that's how it got back to France. Now, let's look a little bit more at her. There she is seated, a lovely lady. And the reason why she's so famous is because Leonardo did something very interesting with this painting. Up until this time, paintings of a person were cut off right at the shoulders. But Leonardo decided to, shall we say, lower the picture plane. He lowered it, okay, so that it encompassed the lady's arms and hands, giving her a more approachable, an approachable aspect. Now, we see her seated there with her smile. Look at her face. Her face has the wonderful shadow that the Italians call sfumato, which means smoky shadow. But there is behind the lady this very forbidding landscape. I mean, it just doesn't work. I mean, is she so lovely? Why is she sitting in front of the forbidding landscape? And you realize, too, that in certain areas, in certain areas, she is almost a oneness with the landscape. If you look, for example, at, if I can just get this correct here, right there, where her veil becomes part of the landscape. And over here, on this side, we see a pathway, but the pathway doesn't lead anywhere. This was a device that Leonardo used many, many times, and we'll see it again today. You'll understand this is one of his modes, ways of operating, shall we say. And at the eye level, if you look at the eye level right of the Mona Lisa, you will see that the background is very, very misty. That's another one of his hallmarks, a misty background that kind of softens and fades out. Now, lest you think this is the only Leonardo lady in the Louvre, let me disabuse you of that. Here is another Leonardo that he did 10 years earlier, and you will see what I'm talking about with the shoulders. This early portrait of La Belle Ferronnière, or the portrait of a woman who was believed to be a Milanese noblewoman, was cut off at the shoulders. And this is the way the marble busts were done at the time, and the artists simply follow that style. The lady is she's called the Belle Ferronnière because she's wearing a circlet made of iron across her forehead here. Now, she stands behind a parapet and has just noticed someone approaching, and so she turns her head, okay? Now, there are other ladies who have lived in the Louvre as well. And this lady, unfortunately, doesn't have a head, but she is world famous. And this is the Winged Victory of Samothrace. It stands at the head of the main staircase in the Louvre. And this is very, very dramatically lit, as you can see. She steps forward. And the Greeks had such a fine finesse with marble that the drapery clings to her, and that we see the drapery, but the drapery also reveals the body at the same time. This is what makes it so absolutely marvelous. Now, here's another picture of her from the side. This is taken not from the front, but from the side in natural light. Now, she was immortalized in a movie with Audrey Hepburn coming down the steps. Does anyone know the name of the movie? Funny Face, all right. And as Audrey Hepburn's coming down in her Givenchy gown, she says, "Take the picture," to the photographer. Who was the photographer in the movie?
Fred Astaire.
Fred Astaire, exactly. Fred Astaire is the photographer. And speaking of movies and music, there's only two works of art that have ever inspired a popular song. Of course, everyone knows the song Mona Lisa, which was popularized by Nat King Cole. Does anyone know the other popular song that was done extolling an artwork? Does anyone know the other one? It was Starry, Starry Night, which of course is Van Gogh's painting. So those are the only two paintings I know that have inspired popular music. Okay, so here we have Audrey Hepburn coming down the steps. Now, that statue has been there since 1884. But during the Second World War, they were so afraid that the Germans would come and take it, which they did take a lot of art. We know that they vacuumed up an awful lot of art in Europe. This is a picture of the Winged Victory of Samothrace. It's a very grainy picture, I'm sorry. Being removed, being taken down the steps with some 2x4s and no mechanized equipment. They just simply have some workmen there slowly taking it down the stairs. And it was not replaced again until, and have a better picture here, June 12th of 1945, when it was put back again using the same mechanism with the 2x4s going up the steps. So she was finally replaced where she should be, and I think the French did this because they wanted to show their people that things are going to be okay, things are going to go back to where they used to be. And this, of course, was a boost to the French as well. Okay, now, let's talk about some more ladies. Now, I'm not going to ignore the guys here, but we're just getting into some other things, and then we're going to get to talk a couple of guys. We're going to look at a geographer in a few minutes, okay? All right, now, this is Cimabue's Madonna in Majesty from 1280. It is a Sienese painting, and it was brought by Napoleon's army, by the way, from Italy. They, as I told you, they looted Italy and brought 5,000 paintings back. Most of them were returned. This one, however, was not, and it is from the St. Francis Church in Pisa. Now, the enthroned Madonna is seated against a a gold background, which goes back to the Byzantine icons, and with the angels, which I call wearing pipe plate halos, okay? Now, the painting itself is rather flat. That is to say, there is no perspective in the painting. We do not get a sense of space in the painting. But we see a number of angels standing one behind the other. Now, we see where the angels in the front are standing, but what are the angels behind them standing on? Probably nothing, because the only way he could show depth was by simply putting one figure behind the other and giving a suggestion of depth. So that it's a very, what we call, linear painting. In other words, it's created with lines, but not with any kind of volume or perspective. Now, I also want you to look at the Christ child. He looks like he's floating on his mother's lap, does he not? He's really not sitting there comfortably. And does he really look like a baby? No, he looks kind of like a miniaturized man, doesn't he? And with a little benediction gesture, he does not look like a baby at all. Now, the Florentines were to turn Christ into a baby, and let me show you what I'm talking about. There is Leonardo's Virgin of the Rocks. Now, there are two versions of this. One of them is in London, this one is in Paris, and when we do the lecture on London, we're going to look at both of them and we're going to compare them. But now we're just going to look at this one. Now here, we see the Christ child, again with the benediction gesture, but there he is sitting next to the angel. There he is, but he looks like a little chubby little Italian bambino that has been eating his porridge every day. And there is John the Baptist. John the Baptist, of course, was Christ's cousin, and he's always pictured as being older than Christ, even though there was only about a 3-month difference between them. And there he is, right there. And Mary's robe envelops John the Baptist, and the hand that reaches out also envelops her son. But notice again that background, the very craggy, rough background, and of course you can see through the crags there in the cave or in the cavern where they are seated, and you can see a little bit of the mistiness, the haziness in the background. And Mary's face again has this serene beauty on it, which is very, very much like the Mona Lisa. Also notice the shadowing, the smoky shadow, which Leonardo was absolute master of. And there is the angel pointing to John the Baptist, who will come before Christ and who will preach before Christ begins his preaching and his 3-year service as a preacher. Now look at the ground. You can see that there were rocks right here. Whoops, sorry. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I'm not familiar with this equipment here. Right here, there is a rock, and there is also a flower next to it, which is known as the Star of Bethlehem. And we will see stars of Bethlehem again alluding to the place of Christ's birth. Now, here is Botticelli. Botticelli's Madonna. We did many, many Madonnas, and they are all so lyrical and so lovely. We see the tenderness of the child with the mother and the baby. The baby reaches for her. Now, notice that John the Baptist is standing there on the side, and he's shown as a young boy of about 6 or 7 years old. Now, of course, John the Baptist is also holding a yarn winder. Do you see that right there? He's holding a yarn winder. And that, of course, alludes to the cross upon which Christ will be crucified. Now, Mary herself, she's dressed, basically, still has the halo, but she is dressed as a Florentine young lady. She's not dressed in the voluminous blue robe that we saw with Cimabue, but she's dressed as wearing fashionable clothing, loose sleeves, and an underdress of red, and she's shown as a fashionable lady in a garden, which is again another very unusual setting for her. But that began also during the Italian Renaissance. Here's another one. Look at Raphael of the Dear Madonnas. It's called La Belle Jardiniere, which means the beautiful gardener, and Mary is seated in a garden. We'll be talking more about gardens in a few minutes, okay? And there is, again, John the Baptist with the yarn, John the Baptist with the yarn winder right there, and there is Christ, and she is holding on to him and supporting him because he's still a shaky little toddler, okay, and he needs a little bit of help. And John the Baptist, of course, bows down, but is genuflecting to him. Now, notice that the upper part of the painting is sky, and it frames Mary so beautifully. And behind her, there is a village. And if you look here very closely, you will see very, very, very meticulous plants, because the Renaissance artist suddenly rediscovered nature. And this, of course, was the influence also of Leonardo, who filled his notebooks with all sorts of natural plants, water rippling over rocks. Leonardo was fascinated with water, very, very fascinated with it, and it's shown in his notebooks. Now, Raphael did many paintings like this, and he's called Raphael of the Dear Madonnas because they were so wonderful that he did so many of them because they were so very popular, and in many cases they would even be given to an engaged couple as a marriage gift. So that was not at all unusual to give a painting like this to a couple that were going to be married. Now I'm showing you this one. This is by I think it's Giovanni Albani. Let me see here. Francesco Albani. It is a nativity. And it's very small. It's 16 by 11 inches. But it is an oil painting done on copper. And it gives a glow from within. The Madonna uncovers the child, and the light that emanates from him is stronger than the light of the lantern, of the torch in the back, the lantern, or even the heavenly light. The light from it glows from within the center of the painting, and it focuses our eye right on the center of the painting. And notice the highlights on the face of the shepherd here, and there is another young shepherd there, and there is also Mary, and how beautiful. And even the cow looks at the child, and just so lovely. And I wanted to show this to you because it's something it's not famous. It's not famous. But sometimes you have to look at other paintings that aren't famous. And this looked to me to be so beautiful and beyond lovely, truly, truly. Now, I'm going to show you something else. It's very, very mysterious and has an ethereal quality to it. And it's first recorded in a French collection in 1638. We don't know how it got to the Louvre, but it was in France in 1638. And it was done approximately 1600. Now, the next picture is not a nativity, but it also shows love and devotion. This is a very famous painting by Domenico Ghirlandaio, and it is famous because of the subject. The subject was a banker, a Florentine banker, on his grandson. And notice he is suffering from either extreme acne rosacea or rhinophyma, or else he might even be suffering from leprosy as well, because leprosy was common even in Italy during the Renaissance. But look at the tenderness between the grandson and the grandfather. The little boy wears a little red hat. Now, those red hats were worn by Florentine men as a sign of their citizenship in Florence. So that shows that the little boy is a Florentine citizen. And behind him, Ghirlandaio has put a window, and a window looking out onto the world, the natural world, with a path, a tree, and in the background a bluish gray butte, a rather formidable looking mountain in the background. But he, again, showing the interest in nature and in the natural world around us. The Renaissance rediscovered nature, shall we say. And as you look at the man here and the boy, you see that they exist in space. There is a sense of perspective or of depth to the painting. And what adds to the depth, of course, is the landscape that you see through the window. And Ghirlandaio also had a wonderful sense of texture. Now look at the clothing. You can tell that his robe is fur trimmed, and that he's wearing a velvet robe. And look at the hair of the little boy, how beautifully it's done, and also the hair of the grandfather. Just beautifully done, very, very silky, and beautiful sense of texture, and the highlights on the hair as well, as you can see. Now here is Correggio. There is one word that can define Correggio, and that is lyrical. His figures are always graceful, lyrical, and filled with an inner beauty. He was a master of light and shadow, and what do we see here? Well, first of all, we see St. Catherine of Siena. How do we know it's St. Catherine of Siena? Well, she's holding a sword, which was the instrument of her martyrdom. Behind her is Saint Sebastian. How do we know that? Well, Saint Sebastian is holding arrows, and of course that was the object, that was the way that he was martyred. He was killed with a shot of arrows. But in the center of the painting, you will see three hands right there, right there in the center of the painting. I normally walk around during my lectures, but I'm kind of anchored here because I have to be by the microphone, so I'm sorry. Okay, right there. You will see three hands, the Madonnas, the babies, and St. Catherine's. And that is in the exact center of the painting. And our eyes focus on that. Look at the delicacy with which those hands are done. They are just absolutely marvelous. And there is the Madonna's, the other hand of the Madonna. So beautifully done, really. It's absolute perfection. That's all the elements in this painting are absolute perfection. Now let's look for a moment at Titian. Titian was from Venice. He lived to the age of 89, thus he had a huge output because he continued painting all his life. Everybody wanted a painting by Titian. Everybody who was anybody wanted a painting by Titian. Here we see a very sensuous young lady whom he painted a number of times. It's called A Woman with the Mirror. We do not know if she was a courtesan, or if she was a relative of his, that we do not know. But look at the contrast between the smoothness of her skin and the fabric of her dress. For example, look at the arm right here, right there, okay, and the hair. Look at the texture of the hair, and look at the swing of the sleeve of the dress, and the textural differences between the three things that I've just shown you. Now, there are two mirrors. One mirror that is behind her, and you see the reflection of the window, which is in our space, and then there is also another mirror here that the attendant holds and that she's using to look into right here. Now, Mirrors can create a magical illusion by reflecting the space beyond the limits of the painting. And we will be looking at mirrors in a few minutes as well. We'll be looking at some more mirrors, okay? Now, here's another Titian. This is another portrait of Francis I. Now, Titian worked in Venice. Francis I lived at Fontainebleau, and Francis was not going to go to Venice, and Titian was not going to come to France, so the painting was done. This painting, portrait of Francis I, which he wanted a portrait by Titian, was done from a medallion that was sent to Titian, and then Titian simply reproduced the king in profile, not in full face. But look at how marvelously he's rendered his clothing. Again, all of Titian's paintings generally have a dark background so that the figure stands out in relief, where the figure almost appears to exist in our space. But it's just marvelously done, and of course it was his Titian. Now, speaking of mirrors, I decided to put this in because this is very, very unique. Giovanni Savoldo, he was an artist, but there is his self-portrait. Very, very few works are known of Giovanni Savoldo, and he paints himself in the guise of a soldier, because right in front of him here, you can see that there is armor which catches the light. In fact, it catches the reflections of the window that is off to the left side. But not only that, behind him there is a mirror which reflects him from behind, and on this side there is also a mirror which reflects him. So, and notice he's wearing a velvet doublet, and you can tell that it's velvet, and just as you can tell that that's metal right there, and that's velvet, and you can also tell that this is glass right here, okay, because of the reflection. Now, this is a very unique painting because, first of all, he'd have to have another mirror in front of him showing himself and what he looked like behind, and it would be rather difficult to do, because if he's painting with his right hand, he would then have to rest it for a while in order to try to draw the right hand. He had to be using one of his hands to do the drawing, you see, and even if he was left-handed, he'd have to be using one of his hands, and it's absolutely marvelous. And I've never seen this before, but I decided to put this into the lecture because I thought it was so unique in the entire, I've never quite seen something like this in the entire oeuvre of art, especially art from Italy. Mirrors were used more frequently in the north, and that's something we're going to be talking about with Amsterdam, with the Dutch, and also the Flemish painters as well. Now, here's the last Italian painting we're going to be looking at, namely a work by Caravaggio, the Italian Baroque artist who really changed art history in many ways. He ushered in a new way of painting and a new, if unorthodox, subject matter. He did a lot of religious paintings for churches, but he also did a lot of paintings of low-life characters. And he also, the background, you notice, is not ornamented. It's very plain, and you have this strong band of light coming. And by the way, this is an early Caravaggio. He was still about 21 or 22 years old when he did this, okay? He didn't live very long. He was always on the run. He had been put in jail a few times. And he also killed a man, not over a woman or not over money, but over the score of a bowling game. Okay, so he didn't have a short fuse. He had no fuse at all. He simply exploded himself. All right, now, the painting is called The Fortune Teller. And we see a gypsy with her eyes fixed on a young cavalier, looking like a rather innocent guy. I mean, he's well dressed, wearing that feathered hat, and notice that the hilt of his sword projects into our space. That was another device that Caravaggio used an awful lot. But she is telling his fortune. But in the meantime, as she's telling his fortune, she is removing a ring from his finger. Now, I have a close-up of this, and I hope that you can see it. She's touching his palm. She's touching his palm, but with the other two fingers, she is removing a ring that he is wearing. And I know that might be hard to see, but of course, if you went to the Louvre, you could go real close to the painting and take a real good look at it. Okay. So in other words, it's really a moralizing painting because it tells us, it warms us. The theme of fortune telling and card playing became very popular in the 17th century, along with warnings of thievery and cheating. And we are going to see some cheating paintings in a few minutes as well. This painting was sold to Louis XIV by an Italian count, Count Pamphili from Milan, because everyone wanted a Caravaggio. He was very famous in his time. Again, died quite young. He died around the age of about 37. 36, 37. He did not live very long at all and was constantly on the run. He was in Milan, he was in Rome, then he went down to Naples. From Naples he went to Malta. From Malta he came back to Italy. So he was constantly running around, constantly trying to dodge the police is what he was doing because he was such a lowlife. And he consorted with very, very lowlife people as well. And that's very, very well known as well. Now, we are now going to look at works from Flanders and the Netherlands. This is the first one. Jan van Eyck's Madonna of the Chancellor Roland from 1434. Jan van Eyck is noted for a number of things, but especially for the fact that he introduced oil paintings to Europe. He was the first to use oils, and from there the Italians picked up on it. Prior to that, they used other paint, but the paint did not have oil in it. But the oil gave the paint, the addition of the oil gives the paint a beautiful glow, a beautiful inner glow. And prior to that, they did not use, they used tempera paint, which tempera is mixed with an egg. So they would have come every morning into their studio, take the paint, the tempera paint, and mix it with a fresh egg, and then use up that paint, because of course you couldn't use it the next day. It would be pretty smelly by that time, okay? Now, what we see here is the Chancellor Roland kneeling before a prie-dieu with the prayer book and as he worships the Madonna and Child. One way of telling that this is a Flemish painting is the fact that the Madonna has an extremely large cape on with very elaborate folds. Look at the folds of her cape. You could look at the very elaborate folds and the way that it drapes on the floor. Additionally, an angel is crowning her with a very large crown, which looks like it's going to be a little bit too big for her head. That also is another clue that you are looking at a Flemish painting. Now, what the Chancellor is looking at is, of course, a miracle, a miraculous vision of the Christ child and Mary. Now, you see behind them there is a triple arch, and I'm going to show you a close-up of the triple arch. There it is. First of all, we see a garden with, again, the Star of Bethlehem. If I can just get this thing focused here. There. Wait a minute. There, the Star of Bethlehem, right there, okay, the Star of Bethlehem. By the way, these plants are still shown in garden catalogs, and you can buy Star of Bethlehem plants to use as a filler in your garden. There is also a small rose bush, again alluding to Mary and the purity of Mary. And also in the garden, there are two little birds that are walking along and pecking their way along this little path right here. It was said of Van Eyck that he did not enlarge the small, he diminished the large. And beyond the parapet right there, you see on the parapet where the crenellated wall is, two guards walking, and this one is peering between the crenellations, looking down at the scene beneath him. Now, beyond that, we see a bridge. And there were people walking across the bridge. And on either side of the bridge, you see a city that looks very, very much like a city in Flanders, such as maybe Ghent in Belgium or Bruges in Belgium. Beyond that, we see a river with a boat going across the river. And beyond that, you see a small island in the middle of the river with what looks like a castle on it. So in other words, what Chancellor Roland is seeing is a miraculous vision. Well, meanwhile, life goes on as normal on the opposite side of the crenellated wall. And they did not think of this as being, shall we say, incongruous. of putting the Madonna in a setting like this. It was not considered incongruous at all or unusual. It was just part of bringing a little bit of contemporary life into the painting itself. Now the garden there. The garden, as you can see, is a very small garden, and it is enclosed by a wall right here. The enclosed garden is also another symbol, another common symbol used to show the purity of Mary. And that sometimes she's shown in an enclosed garden with a fence completely around her, and she's shown sitting in the garden. But there is an enclosed garden there, and again, absolute marvelous marvel of miniaturization of the background of the painting. Now let me show you this again from the front. You see, and you can see beyond. You can see all the way to the horizon. But there is also this wonderful, tantalizing glimpse of a contemporary town in 15th century Belgium. And again, I would also call your attention to the very, very richly appointed robes here of Chancellor Roland. Remember that Flanders was famous for their weaving, for their tapestry weaving and their carpets. And this translated to the robes that the Chancellor wears, very, very elaborately embroidered. Now here's another piece which is just wonderful. It's called The Money Changer and His Wife, and it's done by Quentin Metzis. We know this to be a copy of a lost Van Eyck. We know that it is a copy because we have documented evidence on that. Now, what do we see? Well, basically we see a money changer weighing some gold on a scale. His wife is turning the pages of a prayer book, which would be called a psalter or a prayer book. And a book like this would have been phenomenally expensive in the 16th century, because this was before the advent of printing, and that entire book would have been produced by hand. And each page would be an illuminated manuscript, many times even covered in gold leaf. And she is turning a page which shows the Madonna and Child on it. Now, so you would think that, well, this is obviously a painting showing spiritual treasure and earthly treasure. But if you look at it a little bit more deeply, I'm going to point out some other things to you which might make you change your opinion on it. First of all, we see the money changer. He is weighing gold on a scale, okay? And he has some gold coins in front of him, and he's weighing the gold on the scale to determine the purity of the gold. Now, the idea of weighing gold on a scale as a symbol for the souls of people who have died goes back to the Egyptians. If you look at some of the Egyptian wall paintings in the pyramids, you will see the jackal-headed god Anubis weighing, with a scale in his hand, weighing the souls. So this is not something new with the 15th century, 16th century. It goes way back. And the idea is he's weighing the souls. It's symbolic of the gold being weighed is symbolic of the weighing of the souls at the Last Judgment. Meanwhile, there were also other objects which work in with my thesis right here. First of all, you see here a little piece of velvet with some pearls in it. Pearls are the symbols of the soul. And then we also see a glass. A glass is a revelation, as we also see in the front here, a convex mirror, which shows a window. Windows, again, are the revelation of God comes through the window, as it does in a stained glass window here or in a church. And in the glass here, you can't see it, but the patron who has come to the money changer is standing right here in our space. He is standing, I would say, somewhere around, if I could just point this thing, and, oh dear, let me see. Wait a minute, if I could just, is it working? Yeah, it's working. Right here, he's standing approximately right here, okay? Right in this area, right here. Now, Behind them, we see also an open door, which gives us a glimpse of the house across the street. And there is also here a snuffed out candle. Snuffed out candle refers to the end of one's life, when the candle is snuffed out. So that there are many other objects in this painting which actually show it as being a religious painting and not really a earthly treasure versus spiritual treasure. It really is a religious painting, and a very deeply religious one as well. Notice too that the money changer and his wife are very well dressed, indicating that they are quite well off. And also the book indicates, because a book like that would have had to have been ordered, and if she was lucky, maybe she got it within a year or two. This is the way you got a book in those days. And if you had a book, you would display it, because it not only displayed the fact that you could afford a book, but it also displayed the fact that you knew how to read. Okay? That was quite an accomplishment in those days. Now here is another, I'm showing you a Rubens. Rubens' Adoration of the Magi. He was the greatest and most prolific painter of the 16th century, along with Rembrandt van Rijn. He was an artist, a diplomat. He spoke 7 languages, but the best language is the language of art that he spoke. All eyes focus on the baby. The dramatic drapery, the color, and the composition are very harmonious. Notice again the colors, the red, the gold right here, and the red and the gold, beautifully, and a little touch of red in her dress right here, just beautiful. And of course the Magi, here are the 2 of the Magi. The third Magi, you know, traditionally the third Magi is black, and he stands there with a turban, indicating that he has come from the east. And Rubens, now Rubens had a huge studio with many artists working for him, doing various parts of each work. Rubens had put out a huge amount of paintings, thousands of paintings, and he could not have done it all by himself. As I said, he had a large studio. He would do the initial composition. And if there was an animal in the picture, one artist would do the animal. If there was a tree in the picture, another artist would do the tree. He might do the important figures, let's say the angel, let's say the Madonna and the child, and the faces of the 2 Magi in the front, but then somebody else would do the drapery. So this way he could take orders for paintings and produce them. It was almost like an early production line, if you know what I mean, okay? Now, he was, as I said, spoke 7 languages, and he was a diplomat. He was even sent by the ruler of Flanders to a diplomatic mission in Spain, where he spent about 2 years and met Velázquez, and told Velázquez it would be a good idea for him to go to Italy and to see the paintings of the Italian masters of the Renaissance. And that's exactly what Velázquez did, okay? Now, let me see. Rubens was very amiable, and many of his students left him and went off on their own. I'm going to tell you about 2 of his students in a moment. And when he died, his former assistants were all devastated, and many of them created works of art named in homage to him. Now this is the next painting I'm going to show you is a painting we know that is only by Rubens' hand. It is a picture of his second wife, Helene Formant, and 2 of their children. He was widowed, and after 4 years he married this young lady. She was young at the time. She was 16, and I believe Rubens was about 42 years old when he married her. She was considered the most beautiful woman in Flanders, and they had a very successful and happy marriage. They were married for 10 years. They had 5 children, one of whom was born after Rubens died. He did many portraits of her, and he did portraits of the 2 of them walking together through a garden as well. It shows the charm and the warm feelings of a mother for her children. The center is the focus of the center of the painting is focused on the son, Hans, right here, and this is the older daughter standing right there. Now the painting itself was left unfinished. Right here there is a spot, and it is believed that Rubens was going to put another child there, was going to put another one of the children, but the painting, as I said, was never totally finished. But it is totally by Rubens' hand and not by the hand of any assistant. Now we're going to go to another, Van Dyck, Charles I. 1635. Van Dyck was the foremost pupil, the foremost assistant of Rubens. He went off on his own, went to Milan, was very successful there, painted for about 2 or 3 years, and from there he went to England, where he became the painter to Charles I. He was the official court painter of Charles I. And I'd like to tell you that right now there is an exhibit at the Frick Museum in New York of a number of Rubens paintings that reflect the royal family at that time. The exhibit goes on for, I believe, for about two or three more months, and every Sunday the Frick is open from 11 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the admission is simply a donation. You give a donation to the museum and you can go in, and it is an absolute, I have not seen it yet, but a friend of mine saw it about a week ago and said it was a knockout piece, and I would suggest that you go, because Van Dyck's royal paintings are beyond belief. Now, we see here King Charles is not dressed in any kind of elaborate costume such as, let's say, Louis XIV was dressed in. He's wearing a hunting outfit, and he turns to us. His hand is on his hip, and he turns to us. He's gotten off the horse, and the horse is being held by a handler, and he simply turns to us. He had a wonderful knack of giving his sitters a presence and an importance that was absolutely undeniable. He also did many portraits of Charles with his wife, Henrietta, who was French. Now, you know that in 1649, Charles was beheaded, and they put the Lord Protector, Cromwell, was installed to run the government. Now, Cromwell obviously needed money or had no use for painting, because Charles had a huge collection. He was probably the most prominent collector outside of the King of France at this time. All right, he had a huge collection. Cromwell decided to sell the collection. Big mistake. Okay, because it was sold to Cardinal Mazarin in France, half of it, and more than half went to a German banker. When Mazarin died in 1650, Louis bought the best pieces. Louis XIV bought the best pieces and added to his collection works by Raphael, whom we've seen, and Correggio, who we have also seen. He also went to the German banker and bought 5,000 drawings from him and 100 paintings that were bought from the German banker, thus increasing his collection exponentially. So the British made a big mistake we're going to be talking about that when we talk about the National Gallery. They made a big mistake when they sold all this stuff, because it would have been the foundation of a marvelous, marvelous museum. Now, here are two more another painting by Van Dyck. Princes Charles Louis and Rupert. They were both orphans. The father had died, and they were under the protection of Charles I, who was their guardian. They are dressed in armor because they want to reclaim the land, the Palatinate, which was lost during the 30 Years' War. Now, there have been an awful lot of wars in Europe, the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, and the war simply went on for 30 years. And they would only stop fighting in the wintertime when the snows came. When the spring came, they started fighting all over again. Okay, now, you notice that the young man here, Prince Charles Louis, is wearing a medal of St. George, which shows that he's a member of the Order of the Garter. This is his younger brother, Rupert. Rupert became an admiral, and also he was an artist as well, and was very interested in engraving. They ultimately did manage to get back the family lands and went back to Germany. But again, Anthony Van Dyck is also famous for his double portraits. He did marvelous double portraits. And there was also at the Frick a double portrait of Charles I and his wife Henrietta Maria. And between them they are holding a laurel wreath, and he is handing it to her and she is reaching for it. It was just a lovely painting. Now, here is another one of Rubens' students, Franz Snijders. And as a matter of fact, Franz Snijders and Van Dyck were very good friends, because one day Van Dyck did a portrait of Franz Snijders and his wife as a gift to them. Now, Snijders was the one who painted the animals in the paintings of Rubens. And here we see 3 monkeys stealing fruit. Now there is one monkey right here. There's the second monkey up there. And down here, wait a minute, now if I can see it from here at this angle. Down here is the third monkey. And they are stealing fruit. And notice we have this wonderful overflowing cornucopia of all these wonderful fruits, and bowls of fruit on the ground, and a bowl of fruit on a huge array of fruit on a basket. Now, Snyder's became famous for these, what they call game pieces or market pieces. As a matter of fact, there is a room in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg called the Snyder's Room, and it is filled with nothing but the paintings of Franz Snyder's, which we will see in when we do our lecture on the Hermitage. Now, here I am showing you Gérard Dou, the dropsical woman. Well, who is Gérard Dou? I'm showing you this painting because it was the first painting to enter the Louvre in the Louvre's collection, the very first one to enter the Louvre. Now, who was Gérard Dou? Well, the first thing I want to tell you is he was the first pupil that Rembrandt took on. And Rembrandt took him on when Rembrandt was 19 years old. There he is, he took on his first student, and Rembrandt would charge as much as 1,000 guilders to take a student on. So he made quite a bit of money from the students that he took on and that he trained. Now, this painting, I think, is misnamed. It's a misnomer. It says the dropsical woman. What it shows is a lady who is obviously quite ill, and the doctor is there. Now, the Dutch always made fun of doctors because they thought of them as being quacks. And if you go into a Dutch museum, and you will see many paintings of doctors trying to diagnose what's wrong with a patient by sometimes burning a ribbon to determine whether or not the lady's going to have a baby. Burning a ribbon. In this case, he is looking at her urine. He is holding it up to the light, and he is telling her that she's going to have a baby. Now, you can see that the servant and the other young lady are very upset because this lady is so sick, and the servant is there, and the younger sister or young girl is there, and the lady looks so very upset, and she looks, actually what's happening with her is that she's simply a lovesick lady. Her boyfriend hasn't come around to see her, and she's getting kind of worried that she might have lost his affections, you see. Now, you can see that Dou pulled up. There was a drapery in the front. Actually, it's basically a huge tapestry that he lifts up, and as if he's revealing this behind for us. The light comes in from the left, and it shines directly on the main figures, but it's as if the stage is lifted, and he lifts that drapery for us. Now, let's look at his self-portrait. This is Dou's self-portrait. He popularized a painting looking into a window, or a figure standing at a window. He got this from Rembrandt, because Rembrandt did do a few portraits of young people, young girls, leaning on a windowsill looking out. But Dou was to raise it to an absolute maximum, okay? He was very famous in the 17th century. Everybody was clamoring for one of his paintings, even though he would charge as much as 1,000 guilders. Now, what did 1,000 guilders buy you in those days? Well, it bought you a small house in Amsterdam, so that really was a lot of money, okay, 1,000 guilders. And as a result, he grew very, very rich. And he never married. He had his niece was his housekeeper. But here we see a self-portrait of him. And I'm showing you this because the Louvre has a self-portrait, but so does the Metropolitan in New York. By the way, the size of this, most of Dou's work is extremely small, and I want to give you the size of this so you have an idea of how large it actually is. If I can get to my notes here. The size is 12 inches by 8 inches. About the size of the piece of paper I've got here. Maybe a little bit. Actually, it's not really as large, because this is not more than, this is an 11 by 9, and that painting is a 12 by 8. So there he is. He's painting himself as an artist. He has a palette in his hand, and over the edge of the windowsill, he drops. His hand is resting on the windowsill. His arm is resting on the windowsill with the hand reaching over. And there is also a nailed to the windowsill what looks like a jug. This is because he wanted to give a sense that the painting extends beyond the picture plane into our space. And it does create quite a marvelous feeling. Sometimes he would put ivy along the window to show the ivy also extends into our space. The one at the Metropolitan in New York has ivy around the windowsill, okay? Ivy on it. So you might want to go see it. And Dou is absolutely marvelous. And he popularized for artists coming after him the idea of looking into a window or the person standing at the window and doing whatever they do. Okay, well, I'm going to show you a few more of these window pictures done by other artists as well. So he was, as I said, the first pupil that Rembrandt took in 1628, and he stayed with Rembrandt for 4 years. Now, he had been trained by his father in glass and copper engraving, and this may account for his very meticulous miniature style. But he assimilated an awful lot from Rembrandt: subject matter, lighting, and also the attention to textural quality. Now, here is his teacher, Rembrandt. Now, I'm trying to weave a picture for you to show you the teacher, the pupil, and we're going to try to trace it to other artists as well. Now, Rembrandt did many self-portraits, but the Louvre is very lucky in the sense that it has 2 of them, and one from when Rembrandt was young in 1633, and another one in 1660. Now, I want to tell you what was happening with him around 1627. First of all, he is in Amsterdam, and he is a hot item, okay? Fame and fortune have come to him. He's 27 years old there. The sitters are begging for portraits, and it is the most successful epoch of his life, where he had an international reputation. He is engaged to Saskia. Saskia was a very, very lovely Dutch woman who was an heiress. The family did not want her to marry him. I mean, you're going to marry this upstart artist. I mean, he's making money now, but in 6 months he could be, you know, from hot you can go to cold, if you know what I mean, okay? So they didn't like the idea very much. However, he had just become engaged to her, and in 1633, and in 1634 he married her. Now, I want you to look at Rembrandt. Look at how very self-assured he is. He sits there with a velvet cloak on, and around it is a gold chain. Well, of course, he wanted to show that he was a successful artist. He wasn't a failure. He was doing very well for himself, you see, and he was a man to be reckoned with. Now, he and Saskia had a very happy marriage, but was marred only by the death of their first 3 children, none of whom lived longer than 2 weeks. Very, very sad indeed. Very sad situation. Now, there he is in the next picture at the age of 54. Misfortune had placed a very heavy hand on Rembrandt. Saskia had another child in 1641, and 9 months later, she died of tuberculosis in 1642, leaving him with a 9-month-old son, Titus. He hired a housekeeper to take care of the baby, Henrika van Stoffels, and he began a liaison with Henrika. He could not marry her because Saskia's will stipulated that if he married, he would lose all the income from her properties. And Rembrandt desperately needed money because Rembrandt couldn't hold on to a dollar. He was a spendthrift, and anything he saw he bought, which eventually led him into bankruptcy. Now, Henrika and Titus then tried to help him out of the bankruptcy in the sense that they formed a corporation with Rembrandt as their employee, and all the paintings he did he had to give to them, and they sold them in order to get out of debt. Now, meanwhile, Rembrandt had bought a beautiful house for Saskia that cost him 7,000 guilders. It was a mansion, basically. The house had to be sold. All of his household goods had to be sold. They had to move to another small house, and it still wasn't enough to pay all the debts, okay? Now, Meanwhile, Henrika had a child from Rembrandt, her little girl named Cornelia. Now, his style of painting also, by 1660, his style of painting was also considered very old-fashioned, and there were very few commissions coming his way, but he still refused to change his style of painting. He continued working the way Rembrandt had always worked. He was to die in 1669 at the age of 63. Here is his painting. He did a number of paintings of Titus. Here is Titus as a young man, approximately the age of 21. As I said, he managed his father's affairs to get him out of debt. Titus would marry in 1667, and a child was born in 1668. However, Titus died shortly after the birth of the little girl. Titus's wife, on the other hand, would die less than a month later, leaving the baby a full orphan that had to be raised by her relatives. So fate was not kind to Rembrandt. He lived to see all this, and fate was not kind to him. He died in 1669, as I mentioned. So it was a very, very sad life indeed, from the standpoint of the loss of his children. Now, he lost his entire family except for his young daughter Cornelia, who was left an orphan at she was around 11 or 12. No, she was a little older. When Rembrandt died, she was about 14 or 15, and within a year or two, she married a Dutch artist and then went off to the Dutch East Indies. Now, so very, very sad, and we don't know what happened to. We know Cornelia had 2 children, but we don't know what happened to her or her children after that. Now, here is Gabriel Metsu. And here is Gabriel Metsu picking up on the idea of Dou's ideas of painting people in an archway or in a window. Now there we have the chemist. The chemist is paging through a very, very well-worn book of nostrums, and on the ledge in front of him there is a mortar and a pestle indicating what he does for a living, and also a pen and a piece of paper. And then on the outside he's tacked a little board there telling you the nostrums that he's selling and also the cost of the nostrums. And notice the ivy. The ivy is crawling up the archway and is dangling down the archway. Now again, this was another device that he picked up from Gerard Dou. And let's look at this one, Van Mieris. Van Mieris was called the Prince of Students, and his teacher was none other than Dou. So there we have a pattern. We have Rembrandt and Dou and Van Mieris. Van Mieris in turn, his name was Willem van Mieris. Van Mieris also had a son, Frans van Mieris, who also became an artist. So you see, there was a thread, almost like each generation of artists training the other. And I'm trying to show you the threads that go through art history in that way. Now, the painting is called Soap Bubbles. Well, now, and again, we see the archway, we see the ivy, and in front of the archway, he has draped this very elaborate, what was called at the time a Turkey carpet. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it came from Turkey. It's just what they called it. It was basically a tapestry. And if you had something like this, you wouldn't put it on the floor. You would put it on a table, and it became a table cover, because you wouldn't dream of walking on something like that. You really wouldn't. And also there is a bird cage there, and the little boy is blowing soap bubbles. Now, what's so unusual about soap bubbles? Well, first of all, we always, when we refer to something that's going to happen, like the housing bubble burst in 2008, right? Or the tulip bubble burst for the Dutch in the 17th century. So, in other words, Bubbles exist, but then they can break just as quickly, can they not? All right, now, then that is an allusion to also, one is symbolic of man's transitory existence on this earth. So the little boy playing with the bubbles, we have the innocence of youth contrasted with the meaning of the bubbles, you see. And the bubble, now notice that one of the bubbles is coming into our space. It creates a kind of a magical feeling, almost as if one can enter the painting. And notice how the bubbles are highlighted so beautifully with the light coming in, and one bubble is just about ready to come into our space. And there is also, he places a bird cage there, the bird cage with a bird in it. And birds also are symbolic of the soul. The soul, if you open up the cage, the bird will fly away, you see. Okay, and they're also, just as the soul will fly away when one dies. So, and another thing too. Dou many times under the sill of the window, he would put a relief, almost like a stone relief, and there we can see a part of a stone relief, but the rest of it is covered by the Turkey carpet. Now, we are still talking about the Dutch artists, and this second man, Frans Hals, is one of the quartet of famous Dutch artists of the 17th century, starting with Rembrandt, Hals, Jan Steen, and Jan Vermeer. Hals was famous for his group portraits of Dutch military companies and jolly, laughing characters, generally portrayed as carousing or drinking. The lutes usually denote a romantic scene, but in this case it may allude to the sense of hearing. Now notice he's dressed in a clown outfit, his head is turned, and we have a sense of immediacy as if he's ready to burst into song, and he's looking off to see if he's attracting an audience. This is one of the, Hals was extremely gifted. If you ever get to the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, he is in the same room with Rembrandt, and absolutely marvelous work. He has a drinker offering you a glass of beer, and it's as if you could reach and take that glass of beer off the canvas. It is so marvelously done, and this is something that Hals is famous for. There was also a museum dedicated to Hals in the town from which he came, which was Haarlem. And Haarlem still retains the look of a 17th century village. When you turn, I was in Haarlem about a year and a half ago, and I was walking down the street, and I made a left-hand turn to get to the Hals Museum, and it was like I stepped back into the 17th century. The sidewalks were narrow, the street was still done in cobblestones, narrow houses all attached together, and it was like I stepped back 300 years. It was absolutely amazing. So the Hals Museum in Haarlem is absolutely marvelous, and you should not miss it. It's only a 20-minute ride from Amsterdam on a train to get to Haarlem. The trains go every half hour, so it's absolutely wonderful. All right, now let's look at another one of the quartet of famous Dutch artists, and this is none other than Jan Steen. Now, Jan Steen is best noted for his jocular humor. The Dutch love him, and here we see why. In fact, the Dutch, if a house is messy, the Dutch call it a Jan Steen house, because invariably in Jan Steen's paintings there's always a lot of messy stuff on the floor, and you can see there's a lot of messy stuff on the floor right here. We have, first of all, a drunk who is having his pockets picked by two prostitutes. How do we know they're prostitutes? Well, in the background, you see the one prostitute has taken his watch, and she's giving it to the old lady in the background. The old lady is the procuress, so we know that these two gals are prostitutes, all right? Meanwhile, there's another guy here watching another drunk here, watching this whole scenario play out, and there is another guy fiddling a violin. That also happens to be a self-portrait of Steen. How do I know that? Because he did an awful lot of self-portraits. One of them, he portrays himself as a lute player, okay? And it became kind of a game. He would put himself in one of his paintings, and it became kind of a game looking, now wait a minute, which one of these is Steen? Well, in this case, it's that guy over there, the violin guy, the guy playing the violin. So meanwhile now, this man is obviously drunk. Also, there must have been a lot of other goings on. There's a wine vessel. There was also cards, which indicate gambling. So in other words, they took all his money, but now they're taking his watch too. All right, so it's funny, and yet there is a moral message of sobriety and wasting one's life in low-life activities such as this. But of course, the Dutch would have laughed at this because it is really very funny. And if you want to get a good laugh, and there's nothing wrong with laughing at a painting if it makes you happy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I love Jasper Johns, and when I see him, John Philip Sousa March goes off in my head, and boy, I have a lot of fun listening to John Philip Sousa when I look at Jasper Johns. And why it happens, I don't know, but he's also very, very witty. And this is funny too. And this is the kind of thing that he did. But I could do a whole lecture on him, and we would just sit here and do nothing but laugh because it's so funny. Now, here is the last one, none other than Vermeer and the Astronomer. Now, this painting is one of the treasures of, well, any museum that has a Vermeer has a treasure. We are lucky that the Metropolitan Museum has 3 of them, okay? We are very, no, as a matter of fact, they have 5 of them, and the Frick has 3 of them. Now, there were only 36 paintings of Vermeer extant, so if you actually want to see 1/3 of them, all you have to do is go to New York City. Isn't that wonderful? You don't have to go to Europe. All you've got to do is go to New York City and go to the Metropolitan and the Frick. They're both on the same street. They're both on the 5th Avenue. And you can see 8 of his paintings, which makes it's mind-boggling. Now, this is the Astronomer, which is one of the 2 paintings of Vermeer that the Louvre has. This painting, during World War II, has something on the back. Namely the seal of Adolf Hitler, because this painting was taken off the wall and presented to none other than Adolf Hitler, and he was going to put it into the planned Linz Museum that he was going to build and fill with all the greatest works of art that were ever created. This is the reason why the French had to spirit away as much of the paintings as possible. This is also the reason why the Dutch in Amsterdam took Rembrandt's Night Watch and put it on a huge roller, and they rolled it up almost like you would roll a large piece of butcher paper on a roller. And then they hid it away because they were afraid that it would be taken by the Nazis. And as you know, that many paintings were taken by the Nazis. This was taken, it came back to fortunately, it came back to the Louvre, but on the back is the seal of Adolf Hitler. Okay, now, there is also a companion piece to this, by the way. This is the Astronomer, the companion piece is the Geographer, but the Geographer is in the Stadel Museum in Germany, this one, so they are not together, but they should be together because they are companion pieces to each other. First of all, we see a celestial globe there. The Astronomer is turning the celestial globe, and in front of him is a book of astronomy, and on the cabinet there is what is the chart, the celestial chart on the wall is called a planisphere, which tells the position of the stars at any given date. Now, there is a wonderful golden light that streams in, and notice the light, how it hits not only the globe, but also his forehead. In other words, as if the light, the revelation, he is getting an idea. He is learning and getting an idea here. And for some reason, this looks rather dull. The robe he's wearing looks rather dull, but it is a beautiful shade of teal blue, and it blends with the Turkey carpet or the tapestry that is draped here on the chair and on the table at which he sits, and it's just absolutely marvelous. The light that he creates and the existence of this figure in space. Now, you've got to realize 90% of Vermeer's paintings are extremely small. They are, again, smaller than the Mona Lisa. They are almost as small as the works of Dou. They could easily take one and just put it under your arm and walk away. Okay, they're not heavy at all. They're quite small. Now, this is an absolute marvel, and again, this reproduction somehow does not show very well here at all, and I'm rather displeased with it because you don't see the wonderful color of his robe and how it all blends here. You also, if you look very closely, and I don't have a close-up of this, there are pinpoints of light. You see all that little bit of white there? That is all done with little tiny dots, little pinpoints of light on this drapery right here. Like, for example, this, and this here, and that. and this here. And there were also pinpoints of light on the celestial globe as well, which he was an absolute marvel of light. He just beyond belief, it truly was. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't show you at least 2 Dutch still lifes of the 17th century, because so many artists after the Dutch in the 17th century were to draw on this. Manet, Monet, Renoir, Matisse, all of these artists drew upon the Dutch still lifes. Now this one is by a man named, got to get my notes here, a man named Willem Heda. It's called Still Life with Silver Goblets, okay? There really is only, in fact, none of these are really goblets, but they call them goblets. This is more of a beaker than a goblet. And here is a glass, a very tall glass, filled partially with some wine. This right here is a salt cellar, by the way, and that's some salt in it. That's the way they serve salt. They didn't have salt shakers in those days. It was simply a salt cellar. And it would have to be a glass insert because salt, as you know, eats into silver. Now, it's called, a painting such as this have been called the interrupted meal, because obviously someone was there eating. As you can see, there is a pie on the table, and they've left a spoon there, and they've left the table. And there were also a few hazelnuts here, which have been shelled. A few of them have been shelled, and the little remnants of the shell are there. And here is another plate on the edge of the table, almost looking as if it's ready to fall into our space. And there is also an overturned glass here, indicating that somebody must have left very quickly and accidentally hit the glass and it fell over. And there is also a knife. Now, a knife on an angle. Whenever you see something like that, you know you're looking at a Dutch still life. And this was picked up even by Manet in one of his still life paintings. Remember, Manet was married to a Dutch woman, and they would spend holidays visiting her family in Holland, and of course he would go to the Amsterdam Museum, and he would see all the Dutch still lifes there. Now, this is from 1637. Now I'm going to show you another one, basically from the same time, but looking completely different. This one, I would call it a monochromatic still life. That is to say, it is almost varying shades of one color. If you look at the wall, for example, it starts off with this very, very pale beigey, goldish, and then it goes to a lighter gray, and then it goes to, and gradually it gets very dark. In fact, it gets about as dark as this beaker is. And if you look at the tablecloth also is basically another tone from this part of the wall right here. And so I would call it basically a monochromatic still life. The only color that's obviously different, of course, is the tablecloth. And notice that he even shows us the patterning of the tablecloth and the folds in it as well. The tablecloth obviously must have been folded, but now it was pushed back a little bit, but we still see the fold marks where the tablecloth was folded after being ironed. Now, the next one I'm going to show you is completely different than this. Even though they were done within 3 years by a different artist, but they were done within 3 years, but they're completely different. This is deheen, a table of desserts. And this is called by the Dutch a pronk still life. Pronk is a Dutch word that means ostentatious or elaborate, okay? And this is a pronk still life. It shows his versatility and his inventiveness. It is an eye-popping display, heavily laden, a laden table with 2 cloths, a brown velvet cloth and then a white cloth right here, loaded with all sorts of fruits, and lemons and oranges, a ham. There is also some beautiful gilded vessels behind, and here is a wine cistern with 2 bottles of wine. Now, when you think of oranges and lemons, well, they would have been very expensive fruits in the time in the 17th century, because Holland wouldn't grow lemons or oranges. You'd have to get those probably from Spain or from North Africa, which would make them very expensive. Also, notice that for a textural quality, for a differentiation in texture, he places a lute against it, leans a lute against the table, as if somebody has been playing, or somebody will be playing, or someone has been playing, because this obviously is in disarray, and they put the lute down and walked out of the room. Additionally, you will see that there was a huge drapery here that's draped up, and beyond the drapery we see a globe and we see books as well, showing that this must be a very wealthy home, because they have a globe, they have books, and they have gold vessels. These vessels here would be silver gilt, which would be they'd be covered in gold, and there is another silver gilt vessel. And here are some other glass vessels right here. And this bowl right there, that would be considered a Wanli bowl, and that would have been brought from, they're used many, many times in Dutch still lifes, but that bowl would have been brought from China. And that would have been, it would be quite a possession to have in those days, quite a possession. So, now we will go next to France, and it seems like apropos to do that since we are indeed in Paris and the Louvre. And here is the first one that I'm showing you, Simon Vouet's Allegory of Wealth. He was famous for his highly polished works and harmonious color combinations. The wealth itself is personified by a woman, a figure whose wing and drapery embraces both Puto, the one on the left showing earthly treasures, he's holding up some chains and there is a silver vessel in front, and the one on the right who points to heaven, all right, the heavenly treasure. Now, there is also the presence of books on the floor, okay, which indicate learning as well. Now, learning as an enrichment. Now, this is an absolute masterful work, because the gold and pink drapery that envelops her, that flips and swoops all over, also envelops the two Puto, and as does the wing envelop the Puto, as you can see right here, this line right here from the top all the way down. You see, it envelops the Puto here, and this drapery which goes this way completely around and swoops this way around again, and we have this flip of the drapery going in the opposite direction. So it's absolutely masterful. And the drapery serves as the final component that ties the whole painting together, you see. And that's the reason why, too, he used these very rich colors of a pale pink with gold in order to show that the drapery is what's tying the entire painting together. Now, we talked before about we saw two paintings of men being cheated. One man was drunk, another man who was having his fortune told. Well, here's one by Georges de la Tour. It's called The Cheat with the Ace of Diamonds. Now, now this is again the theme of Caravaggio, because Caravaggio did a number of paintings like this also, and also in addition to the fortune teller, he also did cheats at playing at a game of cards. Now, the bravura costume of the young man on the right reveals him as somebody very wealthy. Okay, look at the embroidery in that vest, and the hat he's wearing with a beautiful feather, and look at the gold that's sitting right in front of him there on the table. If I can get this to focus here. Here it is. Okay, there's the gold. Now, he does not realize that he is being taken to the cleaners by these three other shifty-eyed characters. Look at her. She's looking at her, she's looking at him, he's looking at us, all right? Three shifty characters, and he has concealed the ace of diamonds in his belt, so when he shows his hand, naturally, this poor guy is going to lose. And of course, they're going to take him for every gold coin that's there, all right? So, it's bravura Latour. But Latour was a very, very skillful artist. And I am going to show you another Latour, which looks completely different than this one. And you will think that they are not by the same artist, but they are. This one, the Penitent Magdalene. He was most famous for paintings that are lit from within, which give a sense of mystery and also a sense of serenity. He did 6 versions of the Magdalene, and one of them, fortunately for us, is at the Metropolitan Museum. So the next time you go to the Met, go look for the Georges de la Tour, the Penitent Magdalene. They all have the same name, okay? But they are all done differently. This Magdalene is illuminated by a candle that's in the center of the painting, but the candle is behind a glass of water. which again shows absolute mastery of what de la Tour could do, because he has the candle flame, and you can see the flame right there, but the candle is behind a glass of water. She sits in contemplation of her life of sin, and notice that a circle of light is created around her. You have this beautiful circle of light right there, okay? And that was, again, another hallmark of La Tour. Now, on the table there is a cross, again alluding to the death of Christ, and you see that she is wearing around her skirt a rope for a belt. Again, that's showing her humility, showing her poverty. She doesn't have any money to buy anything else, so she puts a rope around her waist. Additionally, there is a skull in her lap. What is the reason for the skull there? Well, of course, the skull is a reminder of one's mortality, where all of us will eventually look like that, okay? And of course, the penitent Magdalene is repenting for her sins and contemplating and praying and trying to expiate her sins so that she will go to heaven when she dies. Now again, you would not think that this was done by the artist that did the previous painting, because the lighting is completely different. And yet La Tour was absolutely a master with this. Absolute mastery, and just wonderful. Now, I'm showing you a painting by Jardiniere. Jardiniere was a French artist, but the man is Charles Le Brun. Now, why am I showing you a picture of Charles Le Brun? Well, Charles Le Brun had the title of the painter to the king being none other than Louis XIV. But not only that, he was the director of the Académie Royale that dictated style and taste of buildings, decorations, and artworks in the reign of Louis XIV. His influence was absolute and well coordinated, and thus he was a major influence upon the arts of the 17th century, and thus upon the French arts that we see today. So when you go to one of the French castles, you go to, well, not so much Fontainebleau, but let's say you go to Versailles, because Louis XIV did not like living in Paris. There had been a number of uprisings in Paris when he was a little boy, and he was so frightened as a child that he did not like living in Paris. So that's when he moved the entire court to Versailles. And the decorations that you see in Versailles were influenced by Charles Le Brun. Le Brun would decide what was going to go on the walls, what the draperies were going to look like, what the rug was going to look like, or if they were going to put marble, what the patterning of the marble would be. Everything was decided by Le Brun, and nobody could do anything until Le Brun had given the okay. Now, Louis, as I said, went to Versailles and made Versailles his residence, and it was followed by other kings as well. Louis XV and Louis XVI, they also lived at Versailles. They did not live in Paris. They had abandoned the Louvre in Paris to live in Versailles. But Louis wanted to keep an eye on all the nobles to make sure that none of them were plotting against him. So he ordered all the nobles to come to Versailles to live with him. And they had to stay, I believe, for 6 months. They had to stay for 6 months. But he had to keep these guys busy. I mean, he just couldn't walk around all day doing nothing. So every noble was given a particular job. For example, one noble might be given the job of handing the king his handkerchief in the morning. That was their job. And then after that, they were free. But they had to be there to hand the king his handkerchief. Another noble might be given the position of overseeing the filling of Louis's wine glass and placing it before him, okay? So it was like this ritual that they went through, which became ludicrous to the point where, with Marie Antoinette, when she was trying to get dressed, she would stand there shivering, but she couldn't have the garment given directly to her because it went through a retinue of 3 or 4 ladies, from the most humble to the most noble, before the garment was finally handed to her. I mean, and it took her maybe an hour or 2 to get dressed. Because of this rigid court etiquette that had to be adhered to. And this was started by Louis XIV. So he kept all the nobles there, and they'd have to be there for the particular time when Louis got up, let's say, to hand him the handkerchief or hand him his hat, or perhaps hand him his stockings, whatever. And they had to be there every day, so that this was Louis's way of controlling the nobles. And they had to stay, I believe, for 6 months. For another 6 months, they were able to go back to their own chateau, their own property, in order to oversee it, to make sure that the servants weren't stealing all the silverware. But this is the way it worked. And as ludicrous as it may seem, this is the way it was. Now, so the art that we see, the art of Versailles and whatnot, all have to do with this one man. He was the autocrat of all the arts in France in the 17th century. Now, this is a painting from the I'm sorry, the 7th. Now we are into the 18th century. Louis died 2 years ago. He died in 1715, okay? Died 2 years ago. He had the longest reign of any king in France, because he started when he was 5 years old. So, I mean, you know, it wasn't hard to have a long reign. Now, this painting is by Antoine Watteau, and it's called The Embarkation from Cythera. This was the start of the era of the Rococo painting. Many artists look back to Watteau, including Renoir, by the way, and this was the art of the Rococo was taken to quite an extreme. Now, what actually constitutes a Rococo painting? First of all, it generally shows beautifully dressed couples, or sometimes beautifully undressed couples, in an idealized setting, enjoying the pleasures of dance, music, and courting. You notice that in this painting right here, there is a statue of Venus, and the couples are leaving Cythera, this lovely idealized island. And you notice the three couples here are almost like in a slow motion. This couple is still seated, this couple is rising, this couple has already risen, and they're going down the hill to get on this lovely boat and leave this idealized place where they have had a picnic and they've had an enjoyable afternoon. Now, notice the trees. The trees look very feathery, don't they? The trees in Rococo paintings took on a feathery look, as if they are made from peacock feathers. Now, so the figures also are very doll-like. They're very small. They are not large. They're very doll-like. And you will see that with all the Rococo paintings, where the features are very small. They have small hands, small feet, and we'll see that as we go along. We are going to see some paintings by the two most prominent Rococo artists, namely Fragonard and Francois Boucher. Now, here is Fragonard's music lesson. Love and music was a popular theme in the 17th and 18th centuries. She is playing the music. Notice the very small features, okay? And her head is turned so that we have almost what is known, the French call a profile perdu, or the lost profile. If she turned her head a little more, we wouldn't be able to see her face, okay? You would only see her cheek. You would not be able to see her profile. Now, she plays the music while the young man has put down his violin. He was playing a lute here. He was playing a lute, and he has put down the lute, and he's listening to her play, and he's turning the pages. So it alludes to a couple making beautiful music together or existing in harmony. Now, the lute also is very significant because the lute was thought to be a very, very sexy instrument at the time. Even in the time of William Shakespeare, in Richard III, the first soliloquy, Richard talks about the king strutting and dancing in the ladies' chamber to the lascivious pleasings of a lute. So even in Shakespeare's time, it was considered a lascivious instrument. And the young man here, and you'll see them in many Dutch paintings too, the idea of a lute, because a lute was considered a very romantic and sexy instrument. Now here, here, the lute has been put down because he is paying attention to her. Wait a minute. Here, there it is. There's the lute. There's also a cat there, okay? But there is the lute right there. And again, a couple in harmony, existing in harmony together. And this, of course, was part of courtship at the time. Courtship was much more, shall we say, rigid and codified than it is today. Today, it's, we'll meet at Starbucks for a cup of coffee. Okay, and she has to pay for both cups of coffee. Okay, now, this is the quintessential Rococo painting. Bottoms were in France in the 18th century, okay? It is naughty, it is teasing, and just to the taste of the French. The young ladies cavort in the water, and as you can see, there are those feathery trees again. It looks like they're feather fans, don't they? Made from feathers. And the young ladies are cavorting in the water, and there is one showing her bottom to us, and a lovely, beautiful, and again, notice the tiny features and the small noses, the small feet, the small hands, all very, very small and doll-like. And also the color. The colors they used were primarily pastels. They did not use strong colors. Pink and blue and pale green were, and also an off-white were very, very fashionable colors at the time. Now, this is Fragonard, and now I'm going to show you two paintings by Boucher. Here is Boucher's Madame de Pompadour, and I'm showing you her portrait because what Charles Le Brun was in the 17th century, Madame de Pompadour was in the 18th century. She was the mistress of Louis XV, and she was the patron of the arts and wielded the same influence in the 18th century that Le Brun did in the 17th century. She was a patron of the Sèvres porcelain works. As a matter of fact, the pink porcelain that Sèvres put out was called Rose Pompadour. It was named after her. She stands in a music room, again wearing a very, very elaborate dress with bows and whatnot and an elaborate ruffle around her neck. And she stands in a music room with a globe on the floor, again alluding, she was a very, very learned woman, by the way. Louis XV absolutely adored her. And she died quite young of breast cancer. And we know this because of the written accounts of her death, that she died of breast cancer, and of course there was no help for her at that time. And notice the clothes, the elaborate clothes, and the beautiful sheen, the silk always looks so gorgeous because of the light coming down on the dress. And here is another Boucher, the morning coffee. Now, it says morning coffee, but that little pot right there could also be a chocolate pot. In other words, chocolate pot. Coffee was popular in the 18th century, but so was chocolate. They had chocolate shops where, even in London, where you could go and actually have a glass of hot chocolate, which was really quite a delightful thing and quite a novelty at the time. So here is a family, a middle-class family, or upper-middle-class family, I should say, and they are having coffee, and two of the children are with them. There's a little girl right here with her doll, and there's another child here, obviously sitting in a high chair, also being served, and there is a servant with the chocolate pot, or possibly a coffee pot, serving the ladies here. And notice the clock. The clock says it's 10 after 8 in the morning, so we know what time they're having breakfast. And it's a lovely slice of upper middle class life, something that I put this in there because it's very unusual. You don't normally see this kind of thing in 18th century paintings at all. Now, aside from the Rococo, there was another movement also in France at the time. Not everybody looked favorably upon this rather frivolous art known as Rococo. And one of the artists that they did admire very much was this man, Chardin. Now, we've just seen a family having breakfast, okay? And here we see a simple family, perhaps the family of a farmer having their breakfast or lunch. Whoops, wait a minute, their lunch. And you can see it's a much simpler setting. The mother is setting the table, and it looks like she's going to serve the children either soup or porridge. And the little girl is praying. The mother is watching and listening to the little girl pray. And in other words, it shows the virtues of the simple people of France. And it was Denis Diderot, one of the encyclopedists, dearly loved the work of Chardin. He never came to Paris. He worked outside of Paris, never came to Paris. He is famous for paintings of this kind, of homey events and events in the house, in the kitchen, and also famous for his still lifes of humble objects, such as a sugar bowl with a crack in it, or a copper fish poacher that is already old and rusted out old rusted out fish poacher. Now, let's look at one of his still lifes, which is a little bit different than what I'm describing to you, because this one would be, the shape of this one indicates that it's an over door. And an over door was a painting that you hung over the door. And that's the reason why it's got that elaborate frame. And it is the attributes of music. And what has he got there? Well, first of all, there's a, I'm going to make sure I get all these instruments correct here. There is a violin that's actually sticking out over the edge of the shelf right here. There is again a mandolin. There is a bagpipe. There is a flute here. There's a flute behind the bagpipe. There's a flute, and there is also a French horn. And there is also here a music stand and with a candle, so that when you're playing, you could light the candle in order to see the music. And there is the music. Now the music looks very tattered and worn and dog-eared, etc. And he has it hanging off the table into our space. He was masterful at this, and he did many works like this, such as the attributes of music, the attributes of arts, the attributes of painting, etc. And but he also did very, very humble objects. As I said, sometimes one with a sugar bowl that had a crack in it. Okay, so in other words, he was elevating the humblest objects to a work of art. And he was very much admired by the encyclopedists, especially Denis Diderot, who you know was a philosopher and a thinker, and also wrote the first compilation of an encyclopedia, which compiled all the known knowledge in the world at that particular time. And if you'd like to see a copy of that encyclopedia, all you have to do is go to the Newark Public Library, go into their rare books room, and they have a complete edition of the first encyclopedia that was published in France by Denis Diderot. Now, here is another artist that was also greatly admired. In fact, he was greatly admired by none other than Catherine the Great. His name is Jean-Baptiste Greuze, and the first painting here is called The Punished Son. The son, the father's curse, I'm sorry, the father's cursed. The gestures here are very melodramatic, over the top, we would say today, right? But they give a clue as to what's happening. The son is leaving to join the army, and we can see the open door the open door right there and this side, and there is a soldier standing outside the open door. The son is leaving. The mother and the sisters and the younger siblings are begging the son to stay. Oh, please don't go, please don't go. Even the little baby here is begging and hanging onto his leg so that he does not leave. And the assorted family members mirror the emotions of the main characters. The father appeals to him not to abandon the family and cites the sacrifice he has endured for the family. But there is always a moralizing message with Greuze of family loyalty, chastity, and honesty. Now, the following year he did the second, this is actually two paintings, The Father's Curse in 1777 and The Punished Son in 1778. The son comes home finding that his father had just died, and shows the grief-stricken faces and the hand gestures of the family members. The mother's gesture reveals to the son what his disobedience has led to. He, in turn, sinks to the ground in grief and guilt for the sorrow he has brought upon the family. Again, very melodramatic and a little bit too much for our taste today in the 20th century, but Catherine the Great wrote a letter to her ambassador in Paris, and she said, please send me something by Monsieur Greuze. And of course, if Catherine the Great asked for it, you wouldn't dare say no. Would you say no to Catherine the Great? You wouldn't say no to her. So believe me, and Catherine the Great got a number of Greuze paintings, okay? Now, I'm going to show you this one, David's Oath of the Horatii. It was done in 1784, just on the eve of the French Revolution, which was 1789, as you know. And it is considered the first painting of the 19th century, even though it was done in the 18th century. Now, Rococo has been left behind. You see here a very serious theme of the three sons, the Horatii, Oath of the Horatii, giving the oath. Now, actually, that was a Roman oath. It looks like there's, you know, it's a Nazi salute, but it wasn't, because the Nazi salute was derived from the oath that the Romans would take, where they would raise their right hand in that way. So there are the three sons swearing. The father is holding the swords, and the sons are swearing to die with the sword or come home with it, okay, or die with the sword. Meanwhile, their wives on the side there are weeping, and you notice that there were three archways. One archway frames the sons, the second archway in the middle frames the father, and the third archway frames these grieving women, because the sons are going off to fight their brothers. They come from another Roman tribe, so they know that either their husbands will die or their family members will die, and that's the reason for the grief. But the father makes the sons swear their oath of loyalty to the nation. So in other words, the message is one of loyalty to one's country. That is more important than the loyalty to family ties. The fathers hold the swords, and they swear upon those swords. Now, this painting was shown to Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette, and Louis XVI approved the painting and was very, very pleased with it. Now, this is a huge painting. I've got to tell you, it's like about 6 feet across and about 4 or 5 feet high. It's a very, very large painting, much bigger than what you see here. And thus it really is, it's life-size, okay? It's a life-size painting. And this is the kind of things the kind of work that David did. He went back to ancient Roman history, and he began painting, doing paintings of ancient Roman history. And it exemplified the ideals of the revolution. And he became, as a result, the most famous painter during the French Revolution. In fact, he even was one of the delegates that voted to execute Louis XVI. And he then became the court painter to Napoleon, again painting Napoleon in all these wonderful guises. And so he actually bridged from the 18th century into the 19th century. He was the famous painter in France at the time of the Revolution, and he was also equally famous and equally kept busy by Napoleon doing many, many portraits. So that is the reason why it is called the first painting of the 19th century, even though it was done in 1784. Now, I'm going to show you another work here by Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres. Ingres dominated French art at the beginning of the 19th century. His portrait here of Monsieur Riviere is clear, concise, and shows his ability to reveal a sitter's personality. But Madame Riviere shows his masterful ability to exploit women's dress and accessories to create an absolute knockout work. The gold embroidered stole that she wears, the shawl that she wears, swirls around her. There it is. Goes around this way and swirls around her arm and twists all the way down. And then you have the veil that she is wearing that's puffed out onto the sofa behind her. It absolutely creates a marvelous, an arresting work full of the sense of movement. And it reveals also her personality. She must have been quite a charming lady. But that was Ingres' one ability. He was much better in doing portraits of women than portraits of men, because he could exploit what they were wearing in order to reveal so much of them. And this is, again, one of his absolute marvelous works. Now, the last one I'm going to show you is this painting. This is the topic that the lady that I'm going to be talking about next month, and I want to give you a little introduction to her. Her full name was actually Louise Elizabeth V.J. Lebrun. She was born in 1755, the same year that Marie Antoinette was born, and that's important because she became one of Marie Antoinette's portraitists. Now, in this year, 1789, you know, the Bastille was stormed by the mob, and they released all the prisoners. There were only about a dozen prisoners there, and some of them were just guys that were pickpockets in the first place. But they stormed the Bastille. And this is her young daughter, Julie, who was about 6 or 7 years old at the time. By the end of 1789, in October of 1789, she was forced to flee France because of her connection with Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette had become the hated symbol of the French Revolution, and Elizabeth V.J. Lebrun was one of her, again, who had done numerous paintings, and everyone knew who she was. She was forced to flee with her daughter and very little money in her pocket, okay? She was forced to flee France. She went to Italy and was not allowed to come back for 12 years, during which she was in exile. So the subject of my next lecture is going to be Elizabeth V.J. Lebrun, and I'm doing it next month because there is currently an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of the works of V.J. Lebrun. It is only the second one-woman show that she has had. The last one was in the 1980s at the Met. This show came from Paris in January. I was in Paris in September and I saw the show, and it was a real knockout. Unfortunately, there were 150 paintings that were shown in Paris. Only 80 of them have been brought here, unfortunately, so there's only half the show that you're going to see, but it is truly spectacular. And it shows a woman who was able to make a living for herself and her child and survive the French Revolution, going first to Italy, then to Vienna, Berlin, and eventually St. Petersburg and Moscow in Russia, where she spent 6 years. So I don't want to give away everything, but I want to give you a good introduction to her, so you know next month what you're going to see. Now, the show goes until the 15th of May, so if you come to the lecture in April, you will still have 2.5 weeks to get yourself into the Metropolitan in New York and see the show in New York. All right, thank you so much for your attention.